Hi, this is Michael Buffer, and welcome to the BoxHard Podcast.
Hello, everyone. This is Mikey Garcia.
This the monster from the swamps, Regis Rougarou Program.
Hey, what's up? This is King Carlos Molina, former IBF world champ.
This is Michael, the Bounty Hunter, 2012 Olympian and your people's champ.
This is Charlie Edwards, flyweight champion of the world.
This is Fast Eddie Chambers, and you're listening to the BoxHard Podcast with my main man, Joey Coastman.
Hello everybody and welcome to episode 487 of the BoxHard Podcast. I'm your host Joey Coastman. I'm joined as ever by former heavyweight world title challenger, the main man himself, Mr. Fast Eddie Chambers. Eddie, how you doing this week?
I'm doing great, my man. How about you?
Always good when speaking with you, Eddie. Always good when speaking with you. Let's dive straight into the review part of the show. I want the review part to just fly by so we can sink our teeth into the preview part, because I'm sure all our listeners will know it's a juicy weekend this weekend. But anyway, let's dive straight into, like I say, the review part of the show. Friday the 14th of February, Valentine's Day at the Madison Square Garden Theatre in New York, USA. Over here live on ESPN Plus and on Sky Sports in the UK, we saw Vito Mielnicki Jr. 20-1. He's now got a majority draw over 10 rounds against Conor Coyle, the previously undefeated, still undefeated, 21-0 with a draw. Conor Coyle. That one was for the vacant WBC USA, WBO International and IBF USBA middleweight titles. So like I say, majority draw over 10 rounds for both those guys there. Also on the card, we saw Abdullah Mason move to 17-0, a TKO for him in the fourth against Manuel Jaimez, who's now 16-3 with a draw. We saw Nico Ali Walsh lose once again. He's now 10-2, a split decision loss for him over 6 rounds at middleweight against Juan Carlos Guerra Jr., who's now 6-1 with a draw. It's a real shame for Nico Ali Walsh. I mean, I think, again, his ceiling seems to be a little bit too low, and I wouldn't be surprised if Top Rank were to get rid of him after that, to be honest with you. Let's move on. Let's move up the card once again. Rohan Polanco, a good fighter with a bright future. Another knockout win for him, a second round KO against Juan Carlos Torres, who is now 22-2. On paper, this was supposed to be somewhat of a test for Polanco. To get him out in just 2 rounds, I think, is a big statement. He's now 15-0. This was a shock, I have to say. Jared Big Baby Anderson, now 18-1. A unanimous decision over 10 rounds against Marios Collias, who's now 12-3 with a draw. Like I said, I think Marios Collias, hadn't boxed anyone of note at all, and we were expecting Jared Anderson to just come back with a bang following his defeat to Martin Bakole. We expected him to get in there and wreck this guy and make it quick. This guy was stopped on his pro debut. I mean, that was 10 years ago now. It's not like we can read into it too much, but the guy was stopped on his pro debut to a guy who was 0-1 and hadn't done anything really since then, hadn't beaten anyone of note. And for him to go 10 rounds with Jared Anderson the other week was terrible. Jared Anderson right from the top of the pile in terms of American heavyweights right down to the bottom. I mean, there were people saying he's the next big thing. People were rating him already higher than the likes of Wilder, the likes of Michael Hunter and other guys, other heavyweights in the US. He was right at the top of the pile. Well, now everyone is looking quite silly. And again, I just can't understand what happened the other night, how he was so awful. He was being hit as well, quite a bit from what I saw. And yeah, it's just a great shame. I don't know what's happened with him. I don't know if his heart's in the game anymore. But a friend of the show, and I hope he can get back to how good he was. Xander Zayas on the card as well, now 21-0, a TKO for him in the 9th against Slava Spoma, who's now 20-1. He loses Hizzo. He was trained by Roy Jones Jr. Good to see Roy on TV the other night. But yeah, Spoma little bit one-dimensional, quite tough. Took a bit of a beating, really. It was for the NABF and WBO, NABO super welterweight titles. Good win for Zayas. Both guys were 20-0 going in. And yeah, the main event, Denis Berinchyk. I'm going to come to you, Eddie. He's now 19-1. He loses his WBO lightweight world title. A 4th round knockout victory for Keyshawn Davis, now champion of the world in just 13 fights. And I got to say, like I've said before, he's a very exciting fighter. He's got a lot of character inside and outside of the ropes. And I'm enjoying watching him. I think he's getting better and better. And, this was a mega statement because obviously we seen Berinchyk go in there and beat Emmanuel Navarrete. For Keyshawn to get in there and get him out in 4 rounds was just so impressive. The first knockdown, it was like a left to the body of Berinchyk. For me, it looked like Berinchyk slipped a little bit, but obviously a punch did land. It was a bit of a weird knockdown. I don't know what you thought about that, but he probably broke Berinchy's nose after that because his nose became a bloody mess after that. And obviously the final knockdown, a beautiful body shot. This time, definitely no argument with that. Berinchyk didn't make the count at all. It was clear to see how much pain he was in, and it was a big statement. Like I say, Berinchyk had never been down in his career, down twice in just 4 rounds, and Keyshawn went through him like a hot knife through butter. It didn't even look like a test. What a way to win a world title, man. What a way to make a statement to the boxing world. And he didn't lose a second of any round. And like I say, for me, he's getting better and better all the time. And he's decided to call out, the other champions. I think he wants a piece of Tank Davis or Vasily Lomachenko. And honestly, I would love to see either fight. But anyway, what did you make of that fight, Eddie? I know you saw the main event.
Yeah. He looked good. Even, and this is the thing. He looked good even with the awkwardness of Berinchyk. He was all over the place. That you could see he was trying to use that awkward herky-jerky up and down, feinting, just out of nowhere, throw weird shots. And what was really impressive about Keyshawn Davis is he stayed poised. He stayed under control, comfortable. Whatever the plan was that he had, he stuck to it. And I just think it was a class difference. As good as Berinchyk was and what he was able to accomplish by beating Navarrete and all, and being on the run that he was on, it was just, I think he was just outclassed. He just wasn't, he was small. Everybody knew he was going to be shorter, but he looked smaller than we even expected. It was almost like metaphorically, like he was just a smaller person, like a smaller everything. You know what I mean? He really was no match. And he knew it. And the first knockdown probably was a little bit with issues with balance. But I think, there's no question he felt the shot. I do think it was a little issue with balance. You know how you hit somebody. It was like when Tyson Fury, when Tyson dropped Wilder with the body shot in the second fight. It wasn't so much the body shot that took him down, you know what I mean, the way a body shot would normally take a guy down. It was more from the force and the balance issue. So it was kind of similar to that. But, of course, that last one, there was no mistake in that. And him getting up, like, don't get me wrong, there are times where guys get hit with body shots and they just can't get back up. But there are times that guys get hit with body shots and they're hurt, but they don't want to get back up because they understand that there's no way they're winning. You understand what I'm saying? That you know it, you feel it. You don't see the reaction from your punches to them, and you feel their punch, and you feel what they're able to do, and you're just like, there's no way. You know what I mean? And you know it. Even when I fought Vladimir, I didn't think I was in that type of position, but the difficulty that I had just getting in range to land a shot makes you just say, damn. You know what I mean? So I can only imagine what Berinchyk was dealing with. But, yeah, 100%, he was outclassed. That's no disrespect. I mean, the kid has a hell of a future in boxing. So, it's not nothing to be ashamed of. But at the same time, it was just, to me, it was going to end up being a destruction. So it was kind of good that the fight ended the way it did, and at the time it did. So I'm kind of excited to see where Keyshawn goes from here. It's going to be fun to watch it as it unfolds. And I'm hoping he gets one of those big names in real soon.
And moving on to the Co-op Live Arena in Manchester, Lancashire, United Kingdom. This one was live on DAZN. Let's touch on the undercard. Pat McCormack with a really good performance. He's now 7-0. A stoppage win for him, a TKO, whatever, retirement. Robbie Davies Jr. retired on his stool. He was pulled out by his trainer, Anthony Crolla, in the corner after 6 rounds. Crolla didn't want to send him out for the 7th. Robbie Davies is now 24-6. That was his 30th pro fight. He's decided to retire after the fight as well. Pat McCormack, like I say, 7-0. Davies down twice in the 3rd and once in the 5th. Pat McCormack was just way too fresh for Davies. Way too accurate a puncher, and just too good all round, really, for what Robbie Davies has got left at this point in his career. So yeah, it was a one-sided fight there, and Pat McCormack looked really, really good, actually. Also on the card, a shock upset. Zelfa Barrett, now 31-3. He was upset by Jazza Dickens, now 35-5. A unanimous decision over 10 rounds. Very, very surprising for me. I said on last week's show, this could steal the show because Jazza Dickens is not going to lie down. He's going to come to win, but I could see him maybe getting caught and stopped because his losses have been usually by stoppage, if not all by stoppage. And I felt that Zelfa Barrett would at some point get into his groove and probably stop him late, but Jazza Dickens is very tough. That's what I thought. Anyway, it didn't come close to stealing the show. It was a very, very poor fight, and that was mainly due to Zelfa Barrett. He was just being outworked. I think someone on the commentary said that it seemed like the way he was boxing as if he just thought he's going to turn up and win easily, and his mind just didn't seem to be there. But forget about making excuses for the guy. This is a guy who I believe boxed for a world title when he fought can't remember the guy's name. I always forget the guy's name now. The guy boxed Jojo Diaz, and what's his name? Anyway, Zelfa boxed him and was I'm sure that was for a world title. Zelfa was beating him and then got dropped, and ended up getting stopped. And anyway, that was his chance there. Obviously, after that, come back and fought Jordan Gill, and that was a good win for him. And I expected him to build off of that and get a win here, but yeah, that loss that he suffered there, and in the fashion that he suffered it, unanimously losing to Jazza Dickens, I don't think he's going to get a world title shot at any point now. I think Zelfa Barrett has ruined it for himself now. I think that he has essentially put an end to his career at that level. I mean, that was his 34th pro fight. I can't see him successfully rebuilding from there. I don't know what's missing from him. I don't feel like he's a fighter that's got loads and loads of miles on the clock either. But the other night he was flat, really flat, and just didn't seem to want it. And that was very, very alarming for me, especially for the caliber of fighter that Jazza Dickens is. He's obviously not a world level fighter. So for Zelfa Barrett to not have the answers at this level was very, very alarming, like I say. So yeah, I wish Zelfa Barrett all the best, but for me, I'm really happy for Jazza Dickens, friend of the show, and it's a brilliant win. And like I say, probably gets a big fight off the back of it, and he deserves it. He really does. He hasn't really had anything gifted to him in his career, Jazza, and I wouldn't mind seeing him get another big fight after that one there the other night. All the best to him, and just gutted for Zelfa Barrett. I mean, terrible. Also on the card, this one was probably fight of the card. Reece Bellotti now 20-5. I expected this to happen. He went in there and stopped Michael Gomez Jr. He was 2-1 to get the stoppage, Bellotti. His opponent, Michael Gomez Jr., retired on his store after 10. He was down in the 5th round, Gomez, and also in the 8th. Bellotti was cut over his right eye in the 6th. That seemed to spur Gomez on a little bit. But I liked what Reece Bellotti was doing from the off. I think he sort of paced himself quite well. He was fighting when he needed to fight, or I should say boxing when he needed to box. And it was clever stuff, but he was definitely putting a dent in Gomez. And Gomez showed his toughness, you know what I mean? And there were times where he had success as well. But I did feel like Buatsi largely dominated, even though the rounds were somewhat competitive. And you could just tell from early on, you know, at some point, Gomez is not going to be able to continue taking these shots from Buatsi. He's going to get worn down. And to his credit, he did manage to complete 10 rounds. So, credit to him as well for his toughness. But a good win for Rhys Buatsi there for the British and Commonwealth super featherweight titles. Again, another man that hasn't had anything handed to him. And Rhys Buatsi, I'd love to see him in another, you know, like big domestic clash, because I think he deserves it. And you know, he always gives it 100%, Rhys Buatsi. So I enjoy watching him fight. I'm a big fan of his. And then, the main event for the vacant WBO interim super lightweight world title. Friend of the show, Jack Catterall, now 30-2. A split decision loss over 12 rounds to the undefeated 32-0 now, Arnold Barboza Jr. Like I say, split decision over 12. Extremely poor fight. And I know that this can sometimes be the case in a Jack Catterall fight, but I expected so much more from him. I really did. I really, really did. And I tweeted about this the day after the fight, you know, because I was kind of just thinking about Jack Catterall, and I've always said it in the past. I like to refer to him as the undefeated, undisputed, uncrowned champion of the world in some kind of order. I can't remember which way round I say it, but anyway, he should have been undefeated when he lost to Josh Taylor. He should have been undisputed because you know that fight was for all four of the belts. Undisputed, undefeated, and uncrowned, because he never was actually crowned a world champion that night when he was blatantly robbed by the judges. And he obviously had to wait a couple of years to get the rematch. He did get the rematch. He avenged the loss, went on to beat Regis Prograis last time out. And then this fight here was a must-win fight if he wanted to either be elevated to full champion or at least in his next fight get a shot at the real thing. And at the very last hurdle, he has come up short, which was just a real shock. And like I say, the tweet that I sent out the next day was just that Jack Catterall at one point was ranked number 1 for several years, didn't get a world title shot, got robbed by Taylor, took another couple of years to get the rematch, wins the rematch, beats Prograis, and then loses to Barboza. And now the chance of a world title shot look slim, because again, he's never had that style where you're going to look at him and say, I want to fight him. He's the guy I'm going to give a voluntary defense to. You're not going to do that with Jack Catterall. So he's had some real bad luck, and for me, not fantastic either career choices or management, one of the two, and it's led him to where he is now. So a poor performance the other night, quite flat. Credit to Arnold Barboza Jr., who came over here. He could have headlined a show in the States, a Golden Boy card on the same night, I believe, and he passed up that opportunity with his own promoter to go and fight away from home. That's why Oscar De La Hoya had his card on, and Arnold Barboza came over, I believe, without Oscar, and you know, upset the odds. And I just felt to myself that, I said it on last week's show as well, Jack Catterall is a better southpaw than the guy that boxed Arnold Barboza a couple of fights ago. Sean McComb. Sean McComb, for me, is nowhere near as tricky a southpaw as Jack Catterall. And we saw Barboza really struggle with Sean McComb and definitely lost that fight, actually, to Sean McComb. But anyway, I felt that Jack Catterall would have this in the bag, and I was quite confident, but obviously it wasn't meant to be. I don't know what else to say to Jack Catterall or about Jack Catterall, to be honest with you, but all the best to him in his very tough road back, I think it will be. And moving on now to the final card to mention of the review part of the show. Again, it was on the Saturday. February the 15th at the Honda Center in California, USA, live on DAZN, the Oscar De La Hoya show. We saw Kenny Sims Jr., friend of the show, move to 22-2 with a draw, a unanimous decision over 10 rounds against Kendo Castaneda, now 21-8. And the main event, Oscar Duarte, now 29-2 with a draw. A KO for him in the 7th round against Miguel Madueño, who's now 31-4. For the first time he gets stopped. He actually went the distance with Keyshawn Davis, and Duarte's managed to go in there and stop him. Oscar De La Hoya, of course, jumped all over that statistic, saying that he's done something to Madueño that Keyshawn couldn't do. But of course, styles make fights, and Duarte is probably a bigger puncher than Keyshawn. You know, it's a completely flawed. My memory's not there this week, Eddie. It's a flawed.
That's a flawed point of view.
Yeah, flawed point. Maybe a flawed logic. Maybe the one.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you.
It's just very similar to the triangle theory thing. That it could be a style, could be the situation. There's many things. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Eddie. Anyway, that brings the review part to a close. It's now time to welcome this week's special guest. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the former light heavyweight world title challenger himself, the main man, Mr. Craig Richards. Craig, welcome back on the show.
Thank you. Glad to be back on.
Always a pleasure, Craig. So we last spoke back in February of last year, so basically a year ago. At the time, you'd just beaten Boris Crichton and looked good doing it. Since then, just the one fight, that loss on points to Willy Hutchinson. Craig, tell me, I know that we haven't really spoke much since then. What went wrong there? I was expecting you to really have too much for Hutchinson, probably even stop him.
I think, to be fair, the normal me would have had too much and I probably would have stopped him. The problem I think I had is I tried to make too much change at that stage in my career. And I think like a lot of the assets that I had obviously came from the hard graft and the matchroom training that I've been at for many years. And obviously I tried a new system. Obviously the conditioning wasn't to what I was used to. It's the first time going to fight with not so conditioned, number one, so not as fit, and number two, I feel the tactics wasn't ideal for. I don't feel the tactics was ideal anyway, but especially for the Willy Hutchinson fight, the combination of it all literally didn't even give me like 30% of myself. I think like if I was even 70%, I would have got the job done, because I thought like even the back end of the fight. I think he was quite tired, I heard, going into the 10th. I think he was probably ready to go at one point when I caught him with a few shots, but I just didn't have no gears or the engine to follow up what I usually do in the later rounds, where I usually get stronger in the later rounds. And that's why I say I think my conditioning has been taken for granted when I was finally in them latter rounds, not training as hard as I usually do, and usually doing the conditioning stuff I was doing at Matchroom took a massive toll.
So Craig, forgive me if I've not seen this, but who are you training with now then?
I've gone back to the Matchroom gym.
Oh, you're back there. Okay.
I'm with
right.
Tony Sims now.
Okay. Makes sense. Okay, I didn't know that, because again, you haven't really posted much on social media, even in the recent few months.
Yeah, I just had my head down, working hard, and like we ended up in a little situation to the point that things wasn't working out at the McGuigan gym, and I just had to just say, look, probably my lot here. I've got a push, and I think it was about 6-7 weeks before this fight, and I just spoke to Tony, and I just made the transition instantly and started early morning with him, and started the runs and conditioning from literally the next morning, and we just got busy straight away.
Okay. And yeah, obviously by the time this next fight comes around next month, you'd have been out the ring for 9 months. What's been going on aside from the trainer change in that time? Have you had fights fall through, or have you just been training the whole time?
Yeah, I was training, and I did have fights fall through. There was fights that obviously I wouldn't say promised me, because they tried to make the fights happen. It wasn't anything to do with my end or my team or from my promotion company. They was delivering fights and people was saying yeah and then pulling. I was meant to fight Lyndon Arthur. I think January we was meant to headline a show. He said he had an injury, he pulled out of that. Then I was waiting around for him for a while. Then I realized he wasn't serious and he was just basically pulling me from pillar to post. There was a fight we spoke about last year after that other fight. And he wasn't ready. Then he wasn't ready for the end of the year. And then he was ready for January. Then he injured himself, he said, and they were just messing me around. So we had to look at other options. And then I got a phone call about McCrory. And straight away I was like, oh yeah, it's an opportunity to light heavyweight against a good name, a world level fighter. I'm in. I just want to fight. So that happened, and then I went straight back in. So I was just sorting out between training, sorting out, putting things in place in my personal life as well, while waiting to get the green light to fight.
And yeah, let's talk about that next step. Obviously, the fight takes place March 1st in Belfast, as you say, against Padraig McCrory. Really big fight, really interesting fight. I think it's fair to say, Craig, that this is a must-win.
Yeah, I've got to win. If I want to get back into this big mix, I've got to win this fight. So yeah, I've been switched on. Camp's gone very well. I'm back to feeling my old self again, and I just wish this guy was the guy who turned up in the last fight. But I'm ready to go and ready to prove that I'm ready to get things right now.
And what do you know about McCrory, Craig? Obviously, his rise up the rankings was impressive. He'd beaten some kind of C or B level fighters in good fashion, but obviously he ran into Edgar Berlanga, who at the time had gone the distance 5 times in a row and was looking a little bit average in those 5 fights. But obviously Berlanga managed to finally get that long-awaited knockout over McCrory, which kind of halted the McCrory hype train slightly. Yeah, what do we know about McCrory, though?
We know he's a good fighter. 18-1. Former IBO champion at light heavyweight. Then he went down to super middleweight. I think he won a few there. Then he ran into Berlanga, took his first loss, came back out to light heavyweight. Won his fight at light heavyweight, his last fight, and now he's got me. So that's what I know of him. Obviously, won't lie, I haven't followed his career like that. I've done a bit of my research since obviously got offered him the fight. Just had a quick look in on him and what he's been doing. But yeah, looks like a very good fighter, very good name. And I feel like beating guys like him is what puts me back in the mix at world level.
I agree, absolutely. Craig, what is your prediction for the fight come March the 1st? Obviously, it's a win first and foremost, but do you want to go the extra mile and say by which method?
I'm not going to say which method. I'm just going to go in there and win by any means.
Absolutely. And obviously, this weekend, I'm sure you're going to be in front of a TV watching the mega card in Saudi. I want to run through a couple of fights just to get your opinion on them. And also, I think it'd be fun if I can get your picks for like the big 6 or 7 fights, whatever, just if we run through that briefly after. And I want to put together an accumulator, a Spider special accumulator to see what the odds would rack up to be just for fun. But firstly, the main event, let's start there. You've sparred Beterbiev, you fought Bivol. Who wins the rematch and who, in your opinion, won the first one?
That is a very, very good question. The first one, if I'm honest, I thought Bivol edged it. And I thought they might give it a draw, but I thought, they're going to give it to Bivol by a round or 2. And I think a lot of people thought that. The second one, I think they're both going to make the necessary adjustments. I think Beterbiev will be more aggressive. I think Bivol will box a lot more and have a higher work rate and try to see it out to the end because he faded a bit in the 11th or 12. But I think he's identified his conditioning has to be better this time. And I think he has worked on that. I've sat on the fence the whole time, every time people ask me, but I'm actually going to edge towards Bivol for the rematch now. Okay. Not sure.
Okay.
I'm going to edge.
And
50-50 though.
Yeah, it's as close to 50-50 as possible. And another fight I'm sure you'll have one eye on, Buatsi Smith. Callum Smith being the underdog. He's been written off by some fans in the build-up, which I think is quite unfair. But how do you see that fight playing out as well?
I think Buatsi to win. The styles will gel well. I think they'll both have moments of their success. But I think Buatsi will come on top.
And then just for fun, Dubois-Parker. That's got a lot of people split.
That is very, very interesting. But I think it'll be a lot more competitive than people will anticipate. Parker is on the joke. Dubois can whack. It's 1-1's another 50-50. But I'm going to edge towards Dubois to the momentum he's been on.
Yeah, both got good momentum, but I see where you're going. Right, okay, so I just want to put this accumulator together, if you don't mind. It'll be fun. Now, I don't want you to necessarily pick the method of victory if you don't want to. You can if you do want to, but I think the odds are going to stack up good anyway, because if you've picked 6 winners, then all these fights are pretty much 50-50 fights, so it'll still be good overall odds. But let's start then with Buatsi Smith. So, do you want to pick a winner or just a winner? Yeah, okay. So Buatsi win. We're not going to go method of victory. Zhang against Caballero, Craig.
That's a good fight. I would say Caballero though.
Okay.
But because if he can take each other's shots, I think Zhang can get a little bit lazy the second half.
Yeah. He's going to be targeting the body as well. You just know that Caballero's going to be going down there. Virgil Ortiz, Madrimov.
I know Virgil Ortiz the favourite for this, but I wouldn't be surprised if Madrimov wins that.
You going Madrimov, yeah?
I think so. I think he could even do it by stoppage.
So you're going Madrimov though, yeah?
Yeah.
What, just for the win, or do you want to go to stoppage or not?
I think he could even go for a stoppage on that one.
All right, Madrimov stoppage. And then we've got Carlos Adames and Hamza Shiraz.
I think people are looking over Carlos Adames' head. Obviously, love to always go at the Brit, but I think Carlos could cause him some issues.
Okay, you going Adames, yeah?
Probably, yeah.
All right, we got 3 more to go. Shakur Stevenson against super late replacement Josh Padley, coming off a great win against Mark Chamberlain, but surely up against it. Stevenson.
I think Shakur.
Do you want to go a method or no?
Nah.
Okay,
Shakur.
safe stuff. Dubois-Parker.
Let's go Dubois.
Method or not?
No, it's a hard fight though, I'm not sure, but I'm gonna say Dubois. I'm gonna back the Brit. Say Dubois.
And then finally, Beterbiev Bivol.
That's a hard one. Let's say Beterbiev. Let's say Bivol.
that's how split you are. You're changing it. Bivol, and is that going to be points? He's not going to stop
points.
us.
No, he's not going to knock him. No, points.
Right. That whole bet there, which is Buatsi win by any method, Caballero win by any method, Madrimov KO, Adames any method, Stevenson any method, Dubois any method, and then Bivol points 154 to 1. So there we go. If anyone fancies. I swear to God, if anyone fancies putting some money in that, you might pay off your mortgage. Craig, what an accumulator.
I might have to put that accumulator myself.
What an accumulator. That's the first time I've ever done that, but I just think the card itself is worthy, with all those 50-50 fights, of going through it and putting together the Spider Special, we're going to call it. So there we go. The Spider Special, which I'll post as well tomorrow or whatever, just before the fight, so people can jump on that if they wanted to. Just before we let you go, Craig, if you've got any closing words to the listeners, it's been a year without you on the show, sadly, and we hope to have you on more than just the once this year. But if you've got any words before we let you go, take it away, my friend.
I'm back. Full effect. Back to myself. I just want to thank all the sponsors and supporters who's been behind me. Elite Fleet Care, Printtown, RDS, Mill Team, and I want to thank the ongoing supporters who's still supporting. thank you guys for the time and attention, and thank Matchroom Boxing, and thank Tony Sims and John Ryder down at the gym. We're ready. 2025 takeover. Let's go.
Cannot wait, my friend. Craig, as always, the pleasure is mine. Thanks so much for your time. Best of luck for March 1st. I'll be pulling for you, of course.
Come on, love. Appreciate that.
Okay, now it's time for part 2 on this week's show. No news to bring you, so let's dive straight into the preview part. I don't think any listener will be mad with that. We're going to start here, though, in Tijuana, Baja California, Mexico. Over here, we're going to see Luis Neri, 35-2 in a 10-rounder. He steps in with Kayonosuke Kameda, who's 15-3 with 2 draws. Also on that card, heavyweight Frank Sanchez, Eddie, 24-1. He's back in a 6-rounder, and he's stepping in with Ramos Echeverria, who is 18-24. So it's a nice, easy comeback fight for Frank Sanchez over 6 rounds, following his sole career defeat at the hands of Ajit Caballero, a man that we'll be speaking about in just a moment. Let's move then to the big card of the weekend. The big card at the Kingdom Arena in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Arguably the best boxing card of all time, and I mean that. What a fantastic card from top to bottom. It's a no-brainer that as a boxing fan you have to pay for this pay-per-view, you know. And that's not to say that the other pay-per-views you shouldn't pay for, but there are some fight cards that end up on pay-per-view that I don't mind streaming, you know, because the whole card from top to bottom is not fantastic. I don't mind missing a little bit of that one. If the stream cuts out, I don't care too much. No, not this weekend. Not this weekend. I need it crystal clear. I cannot have any of the video cutting out and needing to find another link in the middle of a fight. Forget all that stuff. It is worth every penny, this card. We're going to start down the undercard. Shakur Stevenson, 22-0, defending his WBC lightweight world title, and is actually a last-minute opponent change. He's going to be boxing the UK's 15-0 undefeated Josh Padley, who's coming off a career-best win last time out and a big upset against Mark Chamberlain. What a brilliant win that was for Padley. And, you know, behind the scenes, what I've been told is that Josh Padley's been offered a hell of a lot of domestic fights following his victory over Mark Chamberlain. I won't say names, but I've heard he's been turning down domestic dust-ups left, right and centre because the paydays haven't been right. He wanted more money because he had a little taste of the Riyadh season money when he boxed Mark Chamberlain on that Joshua Dubois undercard that Riyadh season staged in Wembley. And he decided, no, I want more money. I don't want to fight that guy for that small amount of money. And everyone said, all right, forget it. You're not going to be fighting anyone with that attitude. And he's kind of just sat on the sidelines from what I've been told. And then all of a sudden, obviously we've seen this week that Floyd Schofield, Shakur Stevenson's original opponent, has pulled out the fight with a very strange and mysterious illness. He's fallen sick on the week of the fight. I will actually reiterate, it wasn't him who pulled himself out of the fight or his team that pulled him out of the fight. It was actually the British Boxing Border Control who oversee these events in Saudi Arabia. They made the decision to pull the plug on the fight. So Floyd Schofield isn't boxing, and we've seen all kinds of rumours flying around, and one that seems to be sticking is that he feels he was poisoned by a member of Shakur Stevenson's team. I've even heard that it was something to do with a cream that was applied to him from Shakur Stevenson's masseuse, which is just baffling because why on earth would Shakur Stevenson's masseuse be anywhere near the body of Floyd Schofield with cream and able to apply the cream? It just sounds made up, but I tell you what, there's crazier things that's happened in this sport. Crazier things have happened almost every single week for the last 50 years in this sport, so you can't write anything off as crazy. This is the theatre of the unexpected, as we all know. Josh Padley, though, his stubbornness has actually led him to another massive payday, so he's flying in on the Wednesday. So yesterday flew in as far as I'm aware, and he's going to get there with just a couple of days to prepare. I think he made some kind of check weight, and that was enough for the British Boxing Board to allow the fight to go ahead. So he's probably going to crash the weight, in all honesty. That's what I'm hearing. You know, he could have possibly sort of tampered with those check weight scales. You know, it's not like they're going to bring a representative from the British Boxing Board of Control round to his house, you know, in a situation as desperate as this, to make sure that he was in fact what the scales said he was. But anyway, none of that really matters. It's a fight that I feel should be one-sided. Shakur Stevenson should be in full control. It's just a case of whether or not he'll stop Josh Padley. Josh Padley apparently is quite a tough guy. Obviously stood up to Mark Chamberlain's onslaught at times and came out with flying colours. So yeah, it's a brilliant payday again for Josh Padley. He's going to definitely want a lot more money for any future fights after this, win, lose or draw. But if he does go the distance, he can, you know, get a moral victory in that. But I would say Shakur's more than likely going to stop him. What else do we have on the card? We got Josh Buatsi. This is a fantastic fight. Again, super gone under the radar. And it's a real shame because this is a headliner in the UK for sure, but it's right down the undercard here, and I've even heard could be the first fight of the night. Josh Buatsi 19-0 for the WBO interim light heavyweight world title over 12 rounds against friend of the show, former champion Callum Smith, 30-2, the 2 losses to Canelo and Beterbiev, no shame in those. Josh Buatsi stepping up really to a level he hasn't been at. Now, Josh Buatsi is the favourite. Josh Buatsi has not really put a foot wrong since turning pro, despite the extremely slow progression. He's been inactive, he's took strange fights, and like I say, he's finally getting a little taste of the kind of, I guess, top level, depending on where you feel Callum Smith is these days. What he's got left, it's unclear to see because he still has only lost to 2 very elite fighters. But there's a lot of whispers that Callum Smith isn't quite the same fighter he once was and doesn't quite have the same passion for the sport. That's a worrying thing. But Josh Buatsi in his 20th fight here will finally be moving in the right direction. A lot of people are favouring Buatsi based off of recent form. Callum Smith has been, I believe, a little bit inactive. Can't remember sort of his last 3 or 4 fights. I couldn't tell you who he's boxed, but I could tell you that Josh Buatsi has looked really good against the likes of, you know, Craig Richards, the likes of Dan Aziz, the likes of Willy Hutchinson. They're all big name guys that he's beaten. So he's on a bit of a run, and I guess the smart money would probably be with Buatsi, but I wouldn't be stupid enough to write Callum Smith off, and I hope that Callum Smith, you know, gives him a real good fight, and if he doesn't win the fight, Callum Smith, then I'd like to at least see him cause some problems and see how Josh Buatsi responds. I'll move on from that, Eddie, because I know you haven't seen too much of Buatsi, so it would be unfair for me to throw it over to you in terms of what you think. But let's move on then. Let's move up the card once again, because there's too many mouth-watering fights on it. I'm going to come to you straight away here. This one for the WBC interim heavyweight world title. Zhilei Zhang, Big Bang, residing in New Jersey these days, your neck of the woods. 27-2 with a draw, stepping in with Ajit Kabayel, 25-0. The man that has been just impressing fight after fight, coming off that brilliant win last time against Frank Sanchez, and the win before that against Arslanbek Makhmudov. 2 stoppages in those 2 fights, and obviously he's undefeated. He's on a heck of a run altogether. But this is going to be really, really, really interesting. Obviously, he's going to be undersized massively, and he doesn't have as much power as Zhang. But it's a case of, can Zhang land on him? Is Zhang going to be able to close his exit routes, you know, and close off the ring and pin him down? We'll have to wait and see. And you can bet your last dollar, Eddie, for sure that Kabayel will be going to the body of Zhang.
Yeah, and honestly, have we even seen that happen? Did anybody ever really even try to go to the body? Think of this. And I'm going to pose this question. Have we really even seen a real serious heavyweight body puncher? Think about that. Since, like, Mike Tyson, Tua, and those types of guys. Like, what have we really seen that? Like, the lighter weight divisions have, like different guys, body punching, killers that I don't remember that in the heavyweight division much. Even in.
Sorry to cut you off, Eddie, but Caballero against Makhmudov, he exclusively targeted Makhmudov's body, and we saw instant results. Exactly,
but that's what I'm saying is that hasn't been something that we've seen. So it's such a well needed, I guess, change of pace. Where I think body punching is underrated and underutilized in boxing in general. Especially in the heavyweight division, as noted now, I really don't see a lot of it, to be honest. There's not a lot of body snatchers there. So Caballero being like a serious body puncher, and we know Zhang, sometimes has a bit of trouble going, the rounds and having energy doing so. I mean, being a serious body puncher can actually, cripple him even more in that area. So, I mean, I would still pick Zhang because, he's such a puncher and he got such a great boxing IQ, even though he's a more kind of like seek and destroy type guy. Not super fast, but strong as an ox and he's big as hell. It takes up half the ring for himself. So, there's going to be a lot of issues with that. And remember, you got to get into range to land body punches. And I think that's probably the biggest reason why in a lot of these heavyweight fights and these big fights, or fighters in general in heavyweight division they're not really major body punchers because so much danger with it, and nobody's been really quick enough. I mean, I like going to the body when I was in competition. Because I was quick enough to get into the spaces of being, and landing certain body shots. But I was still a headhunter a lot more than a body puncher, but I did use a significant body attack. But it's just something you don't really see much in the heavyweight division. And it's kind of like, it's interesting. It's making me think of this fight, and it's making it even more interesting than it already was. So, but like I said, you got to take chances to get to the body. And that's something you got to be very careful with Zhang because he's such a big puncher. I'm still going Zhang, you know what I mean? But this would be a huge fight. This could be a main event by itself, in my opinion. But this is just one hell of a card, I guess.
It truly is one hell of a card. Zhang is the slight underdog. They're expecting Caballero to win. Zhilei Zhang to win by stoppage is just over 2-1. It's 11-5. That's just a price that I think you have to take. I mean, like we all know, he's a massive puncher. He's going to be the bigger man in the ring, as you spoke on, Eddie. Big, tall southpaw that can really punch. You've got to look at his last few fights as well. I'm going to go back to 2022 in August. He boxed Filip Hrgović. He didn't get the decision, but the whole world felt he won the fight. After that is when he stopped Joe Joyce in back-to-back victories in the UK. And then, obviously, came the very close loss on points to Joseph Parker, and that was a fight where Joseph Parker found himself on the deck twice and had to dig so deep in his soul to get the win. And then obviously last time out was when we saw him absolutely splatter Deontay Wilder in 5 rounds back in June of last year. So again, he's had 8 months out the ring and he's back here, 41 years of age. You can't write him off at all. There's nothing to suggest in his last few fights that he's slowed down or anything. Even like I say, that Joseph Parker fight was a really, really close fight. He was right in that fight. Hurt Parker, had him down twice. Yeah, there's nothing here that tells me Caballero's going to have an easy night with Zhang. So for me, I would back Zhang for the stoppage just because of the price. I can see anyone winning any fight on this entire card. There's ways I can envision everyone winning apart from Josh Padley. Sorry, Josh. But then again, I felt the same way when he boxed Mark Chamberlain. But Shakur Stevenson is quite a different fighter to Mark Chamberlain. Yeah, so again, I can see Caballero winning. Of course I can. But I think you've got to go with Zhang for that price. And why not? Also on that card, let's move up once again, Eddie. I'm going to come to you again for the WBC interim super welterweight title fight here. We're going to see Virgil Ortiz Jr. 22-0, stepping in with Israel Madrimov 10-1 with a draw. Still got limited experience as a pro, but gave Terence Bud Crawford all he could handle in their fight. Obviously, we know styles make fights and all the rest of it. And for me, I feel like Virgil Ortiz is probably a bigger puncher than Terence Crawford in terms of pound for pound, and can be much more aggressive than Crawford. So I think we're going to see a totally different fight. But again, everyone that I speak to about this tells me, well, how easy is Madrimov to hit clean? And the answer is very difficult. And he's got a very, very hard style to read. I was given a little bit of a lesson on pendulum type stuff, and yeah, he's a master of that.
Yeah, if I'm picking in this fight, I mean, Virgil Ortiz is an awesome fighter. There's no question about it. But this guy is going to be a nightmare to fight. Like, I'm just watching Terence Crawford, and he's one of the best in the world, barring weight. And he struggled to figure it out. And just end up getting a win. You know what I mean? You know, I guess can you argue that it could have went the other way? I mean, if that's the case, then is Madrimov the second best fighter in the world right now, or one of the top pound for pound fighters? Because, I mean, you know, we all know styles make fights, triangle theories, you know, don't typically work, all of those sayings. But in reality, he's just a very difficult person to look good against, a very difficult person to fight. And if there's any chink in the armor, you're going to get found out. So when I look at, you know, Virgil Ortiz, and as good and talented and as powerful as he is, you got to hit the target in order to, you know, to use all those attributes. So, and I just think that it's going to be an extremely difficult task to ask, is for him to go in there and just be able to and being aggressive in this type of situation could, you know, and being aggressive in general puts you at risk, right? So the fact that he's going to be aggressive gives Madrimov just that much more opportunity to land shots that he wants to land. And obviously with Crawford being, you know, a master boxer and being able to switch and being able to you know, kind of mold into the fighter that he needs to mold into to be able to win a fight, I don't know if Virgil Ortiz has that at this stage in his career. I mean, it's a shame that we look at undefeated records as, you know, the be all tell all about fighters, and it's not always that case. I think sometime, you know, having losses at different points in your career can add to, you know, the learning curve. You know what I mean? That you're not going to get everything right. So some of these guys being protected with their, you know, with some of these light fights and fights that, you know, really don't give you the kind of information that you need as you go up as a fighter, and you're doing it and you know, under the guise of being, you know, safe and making sure you keep your undefeated record. That's cool and all, but then when you run into a guy like this Madrimov, and he, you know, takes you apart just because you're not really prepared for what you're facing. I think that could be one of these situations. Now, I'm not saying Virgil Ortiz has been matched easy necessarily, but I think this fight is going to be one of those fights that really tell you who he is as a fighter and where he's going to go from here, at least, you know, within the next, you know, few years, because I think this is one that's going to be really, really, really tough. And if I was forced to pick, I would pick Madrimov. And I know it's like, damn, you jumping ship like that quick. And it's not jumping ship. It's just I'm looking at the style and how difficult it is to deal with. And I'm looking at Virgil Ortiz's style, and that seek and destroy and trying to knock everybody out might not work with a guy like this. It's just really difficult to land with the shots that you want and to put yourself in the position that you want. It's just not going to be easy. And you can't go in there with that mentality, I'm just going to walk through them, because it's not going to be that simple. And you're trying to walk through them, you can end up walking into something. And, hopefully for him that doesn't happen. But great fight. Looking forward to it. Another fight that could be a damn main event on another card.
Oh, for sure, without a doubt. But yeah, that is the most evenly ranked, evenly contested fight in terms of the odds. So the bookies have got it very, very tight, and Virgil Ortiz is the slight favourite, but it seems like the bookies are expecting that one to go the distance, despite Virgil Ortiz having 21 KOs in his 22 wins, and obviously Madrimov having seven knockouts in his 10 wins. Moving up the card once again, we're going to go now to this one. It is for the WBC middleweight world title. Carlos Adames, 24-1, stepping in with the UK's Hamza Shiraz, 21-0. What a brilliant fight this is as well. Again, there's just too many great fights on this card. One thing I don't like is that a lot of people are writing off Carlos Adames, including the bookies. They've got Hamza Shiraz as quite a sizable favourite. Adames is 24-1. The one loss came to Patrick Teixeira back in 2019. Since then, he's on a good run. He's beaten Sergei Derevianchenko. He's beaten J-Rock Williams. He's beaten Terrell Gausha. He's beaten Juan Montiel. A good fighter, in all honesty. A very good fighter. Very underrated, man. I remember watching him against Julian J-Rock Williams where he stopped him. I remember that fight. They were annoyed. I think Breadman in the corner was annoyed with the referee stopping that fight. But, good fighter. I've always rated him. He's 30 years of age now, so he's probably kind of in his prime. And Hamza Shiraz is still that guy on the come-up who hasn't yet really boxed at this kind of level. I know he completely iced Tyler Denny last time out in just 2 rounds, and Tyler Denny was the European champion, so this is the natural next step. But it's a jump from Tyler Denny to Carlos Adames. Like, Tyler Denny for me wouldn't be able to win a round against Carlos Adames, I don't think. I think there's a big gap between both guys there. It's not just a jump from European to world level. I think there's a massive gap. But yeah, Hamza Shiraz is on a heck of a run. He's been knocking everyone out. I know a guy that bets big on him to get a knockout every single time he fights, and he has been winning money for the last 14 or 15 fights that Hamza has had. I'm talking like he bets a couple grand that he's going to get a stoppage. I'm not sure if he's going to do the same here. Like I say, it would be a big statement if he got Carlos Adames out of there. But yeah, it's a great fight, and I just think we should not write off Adames, the WBC middleweight world champion. We can't do that. The size difference is going to be quite crazy looking at the pair of them. Obviously, Adames is 5'11", quite a normal sized middleweight. But Hamza Shiraz being 6'3", and to be honest with you, I wouldn't be surprised if that's slightly wrong. He's more towards 6'4", or maybe even 6'5". He's an absolute giant, but seems to, be able to generate good power. Seems to be quite good all round. It's going to be a great fight, and again, it's a tough one to call. I can see Hamza stopping him. I can see Adames beating Hamza. Like, it's for me, it's very hard to call that one. Again, Eddie, I don't want to ask much of you if you haven't seen much of Shiraz, but do not miss that one. I promise you don't want to miss that. And then finally, Eddie, the main event, we're going to see Artur Beterbiev 21-0, stepping in with Dmitry Bivol 23-1 for all the belts. The undisputed titles at light heavyweight over 12 rounds. The rematch. The first fight, like I've said before, maybe controversially, I did feel like Artur Beterbiev just about did enough to win and was the rightful winner in my eyes. This time round, it's, for me, hard to see the fight going completely different to the first time round. I still think that both guys need to do the same as what they did in the first fight, but perhaps a little bit better than the first fight. What I mean by that is Dimitri Bivol still has to be defensively switched on, of course, and he will be, but he does need to be a little bit more aggressive, because obviously last time, even though he boxed really well, boxed really smart, I like what he was doing in many of them rounds, but he didn't win the fight. So he's proven to himself that he needs to do more. And because he knows he needs to do more, there's going to be more openings for Artur Beterbiev. And that means we probably will be in for a more exciting fight than the first one. Not that the first one wasn't exciting from a boxing purist point of view, because I really enjoyed the chess match that it was. But obviously, from a casual boxing point of view, there probably wasn't enough action, enough back and forth, that guy getting rocked, that guy getting hurt. We didn't really see that. It was high level stuff, and I enjoyed every moment of it, by the way. But this one here, I think Dimitri Bivol is going to need to be a bit more active, and he's going to need to push Artur Beterbiev back a bit more than he did in the first fight. He did do it at times in the first fight, and I liked when he was just jabbing Beterbiev and outworking him, and that jab, he found a home for that jab, and he was peppering Beterbiev at times with a jab, you know, like landing five jabs in a row to Beterbiev just taking them. Beterbiev didn't care about being hit, you know, and taking a few shots to land one. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting, but obviously, again, Beterbiev will probably allow and invite Bivol in a little bit more, and he'll be happy that Bivol will be having to open up more to try and sway the judges, and he'll be happy with that. That'll go hand in hand, and obviously he'll try and take his chance and try and time his shots, which we know he can do exceptionally well. I hope you agree with what I've just said there, Eddie, actually. But my pick would be, I think I'm going to go Bivol points. I think he might get his get back here. And one thing I just want to say as well, it's a quick turnaround for Artur Beterbiev. Usually has a long rest in between fights, and there's been some allegations about why. You know, there's been allegations. There was a bit of a pattern where he was having a fight, then he would have a next fight scheduled, but then he would pull out of that fight and he would be out of camp, and then all of a sudden the fight's back on and he's ready. And that was a bit of a pattern. He was pulling out of fights and then having them rescheduled. And that is what happened with Bivol. That's what happened with, I believe, Callum Smith. That's what happened with Anthony Yard when he boxed all those guys. He pulled out originally and then boxed them after having a bit more time. And again, there's all sorts of allegations around that type of behaviour. This is a quick turnaround for Beterbiev, who obviously isn't getting any younger either. That is a very, very interesting factor, I think, in this fight.
Yeah. I can't disagree with that. You know what I mean? And, you know, these types of things where you don't quite, I mean, look, maybe it was because for whatever reason he had a string of fights where he was just unhealthy. And I'm not saying like unhealthy with, with food, or I'm just saying in you know, maybe the work was a little harder than it needed to be. Maybe he made a couple mistakes in training. He might have hurt his hand, or, you know, might have, you know, I don't know, got sick and different things like that. And those things can happen through the course of a camp. Like I've been in camps where, you know, I've gotten sick in camp. I mean, it happened to me when I was over there, you know, with you guys, Joey. I was sick for like 2 months because of the workload we had. I wasn't sleeping as much because of the time change was still bothering me the entire time I was there. It was just, even though I was in the best shape ever and so strong, and I just, my health wasn't exactly where I needed it to be at all times. One time then I tore my bicep in camp, but it wasn't, you know, torn the way, you know, the way that I needed to get surgery to be able to use it. So I was still able to fight, but it was definitely in my head. And then I had a bad performance because of it. So these things can happen. And I think what Beterbiev is looking, he's like, look, I'll rather pull out of these fights than not to look good or not be myself. And I think that's a smart decision. A lot of time, because as a professional, it's not like the amateurs. You're going to have the opportunity to come back maybe next year and fight in the same tournament and win it next year. Or, you can lose a fight here, lose a fight there, and and you can always reset it when you turn pro. But now that we're pro, these guys are at the elite level. They don't want to screw up their opportunities, just by having something that they really 100% can't control. Injuries just can happen, you know what I mean? And you don't want to compete and not be all the way yourself. So I do understand why he did it. But the fact that he's not doing it this time, maybe that means he's healthy, and maybe we're going to see a different fight. Maybe we're going to see a different Beterbiev. I don't think the first time he didn't do what he normally, he didn't not do what he normally does to a degree. I just think Bivol was much better prepared than pretty much anybody else he's been in the ring with. I think he's also tougher and stronger and mentally tougher and stronger than the other guys that Beterbiev has fought. That's why he didn't get stopped. That's why he probably, in a lot of people's eyes, won the first fight. So, these guys are both extremely mentally tough. They're both really talented, really good fighters in their own way. And it just so happens that they're meeting each other at the same time. They're both, I want to say they're both in their prime, but I think they're actually kind of long in the tooth considering, but it's because they turn pro later. You understand what I'm saying? So it's not quite the same as a normal, 38 or 39 or 40-year-old versus another one, So they may be a little older, but I do think they're still pretty much, they still got more in the tank. Even Beterbiev, who I think is 40 now, still has some more years, in the tank. And, a lot of that is because he's basically knocked everyone else out. So he hasn't been in the ring for that long and hasn't taken a lot of punishment. Although he has been down before, I still think he has a lot left to give. I don't know how many years, but he has a lot left to give in terms of there's a few fights left that, we can get out of him. So, same thing with Bivol. I honestly, if I was pressed to pick, considering how the first fight went, I thought it was extremely close. I could have edged it to Bivol, but then at the same time, I watched it again and looked at different parts. I watched the highlights. I watched different things. And I was also thinking maybe Beterbiev. It's a tough one to say, but that's the kind of thing you want. You want these big fights, these top guys like this to be closely matched and hopefully give the best account of themselves and, make it as interesting as possible for the fans. So I'm looking forward to it. If I was forced to pick, I'm going to go Bivol by decision this time, close decision. But I do think that it's going to go to distance again because I just think that Bivol's a really, really tough guy. He's not going, and he's smart. I don't think it's going to be easy for even though we know Beterbiev, he has that solid, strong, gorilla type power. But I don't think he's going to get away. Well, not to get away, but he's not going to just be able to walk through this guy. So, yeah, great fight. Looking forward to it. Great card, man. I'm really looking forward to this one.
And then moving now to two other cards that we must mention, but obviously, again, I just get on my knees and bow down to that card there in Saudi. But let's move now to this one. It's actually going down on Sunday at the King's Theatre in Brooklyn, New York, USA. Over here we have former world champion, friend of the show, Ghana's very own Richard Commey, coming off 2 years of inactivity, 30-5 with a draw, back in a 6-rounder at welterweight against Jonathan Eniz, who's 35-21 with a draw. All the best there to Richard Commey. Also on that card, returned to the ring for former world champion. I thought he was retired, but he's back. Saddam Ali. I think he hasn't boxed for about 6 years. He's back in an 8-rounder at super welterweight against Victoriano Antonio Santillan, who's 13-7 with 2 draws. All the very best there to Saddam Ali. The final card to mention goes down on Monday, February the 24th at the Ariake Arena in Tokyo, Japan. Over here we have 3 fights to mention. Tenshin Nasukawa, who once upon a time lost to Floyd Mayweather in an exhibition bout and then started crying in the ring. He's 5-0 as a pro now. He's having a 10-rounder at bantamweight against former champion of the world Jason Maloney of Australia, one half of the Maloney twins. All the best there to Jason Maloney. His brother Andrew is a friend of the show. We need to get Jason on at some point. He's 27-3. That's a big step up there for Tenshin. Also on the card for the WBA bantamweight world title, Seiya Tsutsumi, 12-0 with 2 draws, defending the belt against Daigo Higa, who's currently 21-3 with a draw. Daigo Higa, a massive puncher. These two have shared the ring in the past. It was a draw last time over 10 rounds. They're back having this rematch over 12. Again, you don't want to miss that one. It's going to be a good fight. And then we have in the main event Junto Nakatani, one of the very best fighters in the world, pound for pound, 29-0, defending his WBC bantamweight world title against David Cuellar Contreras, who's 28-0. So we got 29-0 against 28-0 there at bantamweight. Junto Nakatani, as we know, is just always fantastic to see him fight. Honestly, one of my very favourite fighters to watch, especially at the lower weights all day long. Very good fighter. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that is a unification, possibly. I think that could be a unification. I'm not entirely sure. I think maybe Contreras may hold the WBA bantamweight world title. Could be wrong. Doesn't really matter. Great fight. Always good seeing Junto Nakatani. So there's some great fighters in action this weekend and early next week, and some great fights on top of all of that. That then brings the preview part to a close. It's now time for me to wrap this all up. I'm going to come in with the outro, which I'll do in just a few seconds. Okay, and this wraps up episode 487 of the BoxHard Podcast. I've been your host, Joey Coastman. Eddie Chambers has been with me for the duration of the show. A massive shout out to this week's special guest, the former light heavyweight world title challenger, that man being Mr. Craig Richards. All the very best to him on March the 1st in Northern Ireland. I'll be pulling for him for sure. There has been one major piece of news break whilst we've been recording the show, and it's that sadly the Daniel Dubois Joseph Parker fight is off on Saturday. That is a real massive shame. Cannot believe it. It was probably one of the most exciting fights from my point of view on the entire card, so it was a real shame to see that pulled. Dubois had to pull out with a mysterious illness, not the first one this week on this card. What is going on over there in Saudi? But they have pulled in a last minute opponent on about 48 hours notice, and that opponent is going to be Martin Bakole. So it's quite an interesting fight still. I decided to completely remove where myself and Eddie were discussing the Parker Dubois fight on the podcast, so you didn't hear any of that. But obviously I'd already interviewed Craig and we'd already spoke about the fight, so that is still in there. But I removed that from the recording because obviously the fight's not taking place, and we didn't speak about the Bakole fight happening because at that point the news hadn't been made public at all. So I still of course am pulling for Joseph Parker. I hope he wins. There's nothing to lose for Bakole. Credit to him for taking the fight as well, but obviously if he were to go out there and do a job on Parker, it would be devastating for Parker. So I'm really pulling for Parker strong. I hope he can do it. All the very best to him. But yeah, real shame. But again, the replacement opponent could have been a hell of a lot worse. That is about everything now from myself. So again, massive thank you to you, the listeners, for tuning in once again. Enjoy your weekends, which I know that you will, and we'll see you all again same time next week. Goodbye.